let's talk about YouTube for a second. I've become incredibly fascinated by YouTube in the last couple of months in particular, because there's stuff that's happening that really is deserving of your attention if you have an online business. Now, of course, I was on YouTube very early and it was fantastic, and over 6 million people have viewed videos that I put up on YouTube. I used to think that was pretty good. But now I'm watching people get 1 million views a week. It's phenomenal. And there's this whole new breed of, professional YouTuber that I just find fascinating. I also find fascinating that the viewing habits of people, particularly, and I hate myself for saying this, the younger generation, I found it totally devastating that I can't say my colleagues, but it's true. Like, if you look at how my daughters use YouTube, it's phenomenal in ways I wouldn't think. Like, they watch music on it. It's their university, Hannah, those loop things, those things you put on your wrist, those little, elastic, things, and you loom, you put them on the loom and you make wristbands and all that sort of stuff. I think it was a huge craze in the US sort of end of last year, and of course it's swept through Australia this year. But YouTube was able to educate people, and my daughter, for example, into making incredibly complex wristbands using these loop things, which is fascinating. I read a great article by somebody who is a contemporary of mine, Max Sparky, and he's talking about when he got his Rubik's Cube. If you're old enough to remember, I was right in ground zero, right in the right age for the Rubik's Cube craze. Do you remember that? And of course, there was no internet. And I don't think I ever successfully solved the bloody Rubik's Cube. And I remember there were these mythical sort of like guides that were around that there was a formula to teach you how to solve a Rubik's Cube. And you should read the blog post. Just Google it, Max Sparky Rubik's Cube, and read it, because it's a brilliant read. But the point, and the thing that made me think about YouTube again, was the fact that, it took him months to figure out how to do it, and he actually got hold of one of these mythical guides, because in those days, again, if we saw something, I was in Beechworth, in a small tiny country town, 200 miles from any sort of major city, and of course I would never get access to any of that stuff. Whereas now, as Max Sparky pointed out, his daughter got a Rubik's Cube the other day, and within 2 days knew exactly how to solve it. How? YouTube and education. And I can't help thinking that this is going to change so many things. Like, you look at guitarists now, look at the resources. If you're learning guitar today, or ukulele, like I am, then you look at those, the resources available today are just outstanding. Eric Clapton had to learn how to use his feet on a record player to jump the tracks so he could listen to, the blues that he was trying to learn off an LP player, and he would use his foot and knock it backwards and forwards time and time and time again. So I can't help thinking, the quantum leaps in kids' experience and where they're going to be. So what does this mean for you as somebody who's doing an online business? Well, I think one of the things you could do, and this is always a dangerous recommendation, perhaps do this with a timer, is you should Google your niche YouTube your niche, and see what's going on there, because you might be surprised at what is going on there. We're certainly looking at what we should do, and you might notice that on my YouTube channel, Ed Dale, and I wouldn't use that as an example of how to do YouTube, that's for sure. It's woefully inadequate compared to what the YouTube professionals are doing, but we're going to change that. We're putting up Walking with Larry's, for example, and we're using the footage from the flying camera and places where we've been and stuff like that, and the effect is pretty darn good, I've got to say. And again, it's another place where people that might be interested in your tribe are hanging out. And what's amazing to me is that they're hanging out there in greater numbers than you may think. And indeed, it may well be that it becomes a very important part of your demographic, and particularly if you've got products that skew towards younger demographics, then that is something else that you might want to check out. YouTube advertising is also going through a bit of a renaissance, but that's for another time. All right, folks, we'll speak soon.